This is fine. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I realize that I'm the only government person to speak in this forum outside of the opening ceremony. So it's really an honor, and thanks, Concordia, for inviting me. My job actually covers a lot of things. I have to worry about model developers. I have to worry about people building applications or integrating the models into their products and services. I have to worry about people misusing models. I have to worry about what used to be called AI, but now it's just discriminative AI. And I have to worry about how we work internationally with other governments. But today I'm just going to talk about one little thing, which is called evaluating Gen AI. Thanks, Brian, who set it up for me pretty nicely in the first panel, where he talked about evaluation. So I'm going to get into that pretty soon. Before I do that, I thought it's useful to lay some sort of context about why we need to build trust for AI and why AI governance is important. It's really about how we can effectively use AI for greater public good. This is Singapore's national AI strategy that was reimagined very recently, just launched a few days ago on the 4th of December. I will not get into that because I don't have much time. But I thought I'll just point out that Jensen Huang, who was recently in Singapore, said that it is a wise and implementable plan. But of course, we are also going to spend a lot of money building compute infrastructure. So, well, there you go. Oh, this is a tough crowd. Okay, never mind. Okay, well. And I'll also give a little bit more background and context about about how we are approaching AI governance in general. The slide speaks for itself, so I won't get into some detail. But the number one question that I'm always being asked is, are we regulating? Are we not regulating? Are we passing laws? And so on. I think for one, we see regulation as a spectrum, right? There are soft and hard regulations, there's voluntary adoption and so on. So we've spoken a lot about that recently, or rather in this forum. So I wouldn't get too much into detail on that. But maybe I'll just cite an example of how we think about issues. To Frank's point, I don't think it's about tolerance for harm, or rather low tolerance for harm, why we're not yet regulating. I think it's about whether or not we are ready, whether we have the tools and the capabilities to do so. And if I would just use an example, and also we are not operating in a regulatory vacuum. So if I were to use an example of misinformation, disinformation, misinformation, disinformation, we have laws for protection against falsehood and manipulation. We have a law for online safety. These are laws that we could sort of rely on for outcomes. At the same time, we recognize that these laws are not perfect. We will have to change them, update them in the age of AI, or in the age of Gen AI. But we'll do that when we think the technology is ready. That's why a lot of the work that we do is really about experimenting, working with industry, figuring out how does watermarking work, figuring out whether standards like C2PA is going to be useful for labeling and content provenance before we then think about how do we need to adjust our laws. So that's one way to look at it, and that's really how we're approaching it in Singapore. It's been a while since we've been doing this work in terms of AI governance. Spend a lot of time thinking about how to give a lot of guidelines, very detailed guidelines, publish the Model AI Governance Framework. I'm going to explain that a little bit, but maybe not too much in detail, because I get asked also recently, what is this model in Model AI Governance Framework? And I apologize to those who don't speak Chinese. It is actually 模范治理框架, right? 模范不是模型, right? So, but it kind of applies to 模型 as well in this case, or models, right? Again, tough crowd, but never mind. So we've given a lot of guidelines. We started looking at testing as something that was important because, like I said, we didn't think we were ready to regulate until we have the ability to test and have AI system owners or implementers show us what the system can or cannot do. And that's why we did AI Verify. And then more recently, and this year, I felt like I haven't slept all year. We've looked into GenAI. We published a discussion document to sort of identify what are the key areas we're interested in. Many different areas, from accountability to safety and alignment research to looking at copyright, personal data protection, and so on. Primarily a directionality kind of document, well, policy directionality document, because we're not ready yet to get into the details. But it sort of sets a stage and give other partners what we are thinking about. And then looking at what are the tools we can build to support GenAI implementation in a responsible way. So a very quick introduction of AI Verify. Why did we build it? Because we want to find a way to demonstrate trustworthy AI, find a way for companies to demonstrate trustworthy AI, not just to regulators like us, but to their stakeholders. There were a lot of pockets of little tools out there. We put it together into one tool. We came out with a framework, 80 over kind of audit and process kind of checks, aligned to international principles, to sort of just give a sense of what could a third-party testing tool look like. And we started also then to build that testing toolkit, starting with fairness, explainability, and robustness as principles, because we couldn't actually demonstrate for a lot of the other principles from a technical perspective, and also it's very limited to just some models. What we've done very recently with this, we've mapped it to the NIST AI RMF, which is the AI Risk Management Framework, to show that, you know, if you are using AI Verify, you're sort of aligned with the AI RMF. That's really important for us as well. And then we started a foundation because, you know, we can't do it on our own. It's helpful to invite the world to participate in building, extending AI Verify with us. It's an open source foundation. We're underwriting it for a couple of years, but hopefully it'll be self-sustainable in the longer term. But that's also one way in which we are doing things a little bit differently as a government. First time setting up an open source foundation. So in GenAI case, very quickly, since I only have a few minutes, we were looking at evaluations, just an extension of what we want to do in AI Verify. Then how does this apply in GenAI? And we realized that evaluation is hard. It's very difficult to do, right? There's no one way of doing it that you could sort of replicate across different models. That's one. The models all react a little bit differently to the benchmarks and the test. The capacity to evaluate doesn't exist. Well, some of it may exist, but mostly they reside in AI labs, in research institutions, and so on. And if you want to build that ability to do third-party assurance of the test outside of model developers or research organizations, then you must find a way to build that capacity. And so we started with developing a catalog, which I'll just show a little bit of later. Also a sandbox to sort of bring people together to figure out where are the needs and gaps in evaluation. And looking ahead, I think what we really want to do is also then to come up with some kind of ways in which we can standardize and make evaluation more robust. A way in which we can more easily, you know, decide if a test is good enough. And that is that, you know, actually testing for reliability, right? So one, you need quality testing data sets. Today, there are lots of tests out there, but are they really testing what they're meant to test? Number of questions is also very inconsistent in benchmarks, for example. What I call testing pedagogy, but it's really about all the setup that you have to do. That really then makes it hard to do it across different models, right? Pre- and post-prompting questions, ordering of your questions, and so on. And then the technical interface to do it easily so that you don't have to change it for every single model or change it for every single benchmark that you want to do. And of course, you want to get into rate teaming, the methodology for that, and then future frontier model testing capabilities as well. So we started by first arming ourselves with some knowledge. We wanted to figure out what's out there in terms of benchmarks and tests. So we came up with a catalog. You can sort of download that. It's a first attempt. I don't think it's a perfect attempt. I don't think it's, in fact, it's far from perfect, but it's a first attempt to sort of collect from what's out there. You know, look at this landscape and put together all the different benchmarks. We offer the taxonomy to think about benchmarking and testing, general capabilities, and so on. We identified some areas in which we think needs more development, and we defined a safety baseline. I think it was also the first time any policymaker decided to stick our neck out and define a safety baseline. Again, it's far from perfect, but we came up with a logical flow of thinking about this, and we invite people to give us feedback and tell us how we can do better. And of course, the catalog can be improved. And then we wanted to do a sandbox. We're very used to doing sandboxes, so we wanted to do sandbox to bring people together to work with us to develop all of these things, right? Methodologies, benchmarks, and so on. But ultimately, it's really just grow the knowledge in this space, identify gaps, partner, cooperate. We don't think we can do it alone. We don't think anyone can do it alone. So the sandbox is a way for that we can experiment and play together, right? And if you're in any of these categories, join us. Thank you, Michael, very much for the first kind of project that we're working on together on red teaming for culture, where we're red teaming for Singapore culture for the Entropics model. Really, ultimately, what we want to do is develop methodology for culture red teaming that other countries can use. And secretly, it's also about, as a policymaker, we want to understand what red teaming looks like in very much detail, get our hands dirty. Maybe it's not a secret anymore since I just told a room full of you, but yeah, that was one of the reasons why we did it. Tough crowd, okay. So to end, I'll just say, join us. Work with us on the sandbox, work with us on the foundation, and happy to join my fellow panelists later to answer questions. Thank you.